For many years, some people have claimed to have either witnessed or experienced various types of unusual or paranormal phenomena. Just one example of this is something known as a time slip or time lapse. There are some scientists out there that believe time slips or even time travel is possible. However, they've also said that due to our current knowledge of science at this point, we cannot achieve it yet. But what if nature somehow could? In this video, we take a look at various claims and stories from people who believe they've witnessed this exact type of phenomenon. This is episode 3 on time slips. But did you know? In 1979, two couples were travelling through France on holiday. Jeff, Pauline, Len and Cynthia were all looking for a place to stay close to Montelimar, and eventually after some time they came across a hotel, but due to it being full, they were told to try the next place further on. Down the road they eventually found themselves on a cobbled lane. It was perfect and they took interest in the area immediately, and even stopped to read an unusually old-looking sign for a circus advertised at the side of the road. Not long after, they located the next hotel that resembled an old stone brickwork type bed and breakfast. Excited and rather tired from the journey, they rushed inside to see if they had any vacancies, and to their luck, they could accommodate them. They were shown immediately to their rooms, and upon the bedroom door being opened, the first thing they noticed was the windows had no glass in them, just simple wooden shutters. The rooms looked dated, old, and basic without even so much as a telephone. But since it was getting late, and they rather liked the simplicity of the hotel, they agreed they would stay the night. Shortly after they changed for dinner, they were seated downstairs for an evening meal of steak, eggs, and plenty of wine and refreshments. Rather impressed with the overall evening meal and entertainment, they went to bed rather happy. After a chilly but rather good night's sleep, the two couples met downstairs for breakfast. The first thing they couldn't help but notice was a strangely dressed lady that came in wearing a silk-type evening gown and carrying a dog. Pauline was stunned and quoted how beautiful she looked. It was as if she'd just come in from a ball, only it was 7 a.m. in the morning. They also took note and couldn't help but notice two policemen drinking in the corner. They'd never seen uniforms like them, but shrugged it off and presumed that this is what police officers wore in France. An hour or so later, it was time to leave. All four of them were absolutely shocked when the bill was handed to them. It came to just 19 francs for all four of them. This adds up today to about £2 in today's money. They all left and donated a generous tip with hopes to stop over again on the return journey home. But unfortunately, to their surprise, this wasn't going to be the case. Excited, tired and hopeful, the four friends were on the return journey home and were looking for the old stone hotel, close to Montelimar. They were having some difficulties trying to locate the hotel, and even asked a few locals passing by, but unfortunately, they found themselves struggling. Eventually, they came to an old track that had the old stone building on it, but this now turned out to be totally derelict. All four of them were in total shock and couldn't understand what they were seeing. The story doesn't end here. When they got home, they developed all the photos they'd taken. Any photos of them in the old stone inn were gone, as if they'd never been there. On multiple occasions, the two couples have tried to go back just in case they simply got lost, but so far, not one of them has been successful. For this four, it lies a total mystery and remains totally unexplainable to this day. Digging deeper into some further research, it's becoming clear that these so-called time slips are far from uncommon. Another story from the southeast corner of the UK, west of Ipswich, lies the village of Kersey. It was a pleasant Sunday morning in 1957. 3 Navy cadets were taking part in a map reading exercise. It should have consisted of a 4 or 5 mile walk through the countryside whilst heading to a designated point. Afterwards, they simply had to return to base, passing through the village of Kersey. And according to the 3 cadets, they had set off and nearly completed the mat training, and they were just starting to approach the village of Kersey. The first thing they noticed was how quiet it was. Even the way the ducks were sat, almost motionless. There was no wind whatsoever, and the trees stood perfectly still. The street itself stood perfectly deserted. There was no wiring, no aerials on the roofs, no cars. All the houses had really old looks to them, and it all seemed to consist of timber frames, with an almost medieval look to them. The 3 cadets went up to a window, and looking inside, the building looked to be a butcher's, but they hadn't seen anything that resembled a butcher's like this before. There was no tables, no counters. They do remember seeing 3 carcasses though, that looked to be of ox carcasses. What was left of the meat had age to it. They speak of a green or almost mouldy look about them. They also took note of the small green windows and a green painted door. The place looked very run down, and they even remember talking about reporting the butchers to the local health authorities. Every house they looked in seemed to have a deserted look. Most walls in the properties were whitewashed. The 3 cadets talk of all the homes having no furniture. There were chimneys, but none were smoking. By this point, they were all spooked and decided to return to the camp base. They exited the village, climbing a relatively small hill. They remember looking back, and they were totally stunned. All the chimneys were lit. They could also now hear church bells. Strange, because when they had originally walked through Kersey, they didn't see a church. They returned sometime later with friends, but the village turned out to be Kersey, just as it should be. In more recent times, time slips have been pretty popular and have been reported across things such as social media platforms. This picture shows a modern day photographer. All looks pretty normal until you realise that this picture was taken before cameras like this model were invented. Another similar example can be found in this photograph. Take note of the lady in the background holding the mobile phone. The strange thing is, mobile phones like this didn't exist at the time this photograph was taken. Although I'm fairly certain there's a relatively normal explanation for this type of phenomenon, it causes and leaves plenty of room for debate. Stories like this can be found all over the world, and in many cases there are stories and accounts that have even left experts completely baffled. Until the next time, unless you find a way to time slip forward to the next video of ours, take care, stay safe, and we'll see you next time for another episode of But Did You Know?